dive into this. So the thing that I wanted to start with is when I was 15 and I was into like half good stuff and half bad stuff, you know, and I remember someone like, you know, I mean, bad is in the sense that like it was sort of like stupid nihilistic punk or even just like garbage shit. Like, you know, I still thought like the Red Hot Chili Peppers were fine because they were in that movie Thrashin' or whatever, you know, and they were not fine. And you know, whatever, like it is what it is. But you know, like I remember like going with my friends to TJ to see NoFX and shit. And like that band fucking does really suck. And I don't know why I did that. But so then it was, I remember some friends of mine were in this really bad band that like worship Bad Religion and NoFX and all that kind of like poppy stuff. And they were so psyched they were going to play Gilman Street, you know, and I knew about Gilman Street enough. And they're like, we're going to play with Gilman Street. We're playing with these bands. And they listed them off. And I was like, I've never heard of any of that stuff. And Carlos, who ended up being in Rice and the Peaches, he was like, dude, this band Downcast is playing. Check this shit out. And he played the 7-inch. And we were like, this is fucked. Like, this is the craziest shit, you know, because it was, at that time, it was like Metallica, good Metallica, but without solos. No, dude, I'm being serious here because
I'm blushing.
You know, it was super pissed, and it was like speaking about all these things that we felt were really relevant as far as social politics, and I think a lot of that was lacking, and that was one of the reasons why we were like latching onto bands like Bad Religion, because they were talking about political stuff, but they were kind of talking about it in a little bit of a highbrow way. In our opinion, you're like, and this is no disrespect to any of the bands, but like when we listened to Downcast, it had a sense of violence connected to it. You know, it seemed like violent music, and that was what spoke to us. And I think even like recently when I saw Downcast play, maybe your last show you guys, no. Well, either way, when I saw you guys play that record store, I was like, why don't you play Hate Comes Easy? And you know, and I could see the stuff kind of going in your brain where maybe it's not quite the same anymore. And so anyhow, I remember hearing they were playing Gilman, and I was like, dude, I want to go, you know, I want to go do something. I'm 15, you know, and they're like, okay, well, we rented this giant moving truck, and you're welcome to come in the back of the truck, like like a U-Haul. And they're like, we threw a couch in there and you can go in it. And so we went up to Gilman to see you guys play. And I don't remember if they played before you or you played after them, but I only saw two bands. It was the band Short Lived that we went with, and they were really good friends of mine, but they were terrible music. And you guys. And I remember there were so many things that were really key and that affected the rest of my life. So, and it might not even have been due to the band necessarily, but I remember going there, and there was, you know, everyone seemed pretty much older than us. I was 15, and there was one younger kid, kind of like, you know, like what's it called, like where you're just kind of like walking around in the pit, like trolling the pit or whatever, like before it was going. And I remember he was really young, and he had this cigarette kind of dangling, and he looked, you know, he was like trying to look cool. I don't think he looked cool. And I remember watching people, and this is when you could still smoke inside, offer to light his cigarette. And he was like, no. And I was like, that fucking little kid is just cruising around with a cigarette, and he's not even going to really smoke. That, you know, it just seemed weird to me. That was the first thing. And then you guys came out, and I remember seeing you guys and kind of tripping out, like, oh, they don't look like, I thought you would have looked like, I don't know, metallic, long hair, you know, or something, like look like metal dudes, you know. And I was like, oh, okay, look like surfers or whatever, you know. And so you came out, and the first thing you said was something about how, like, oh, a lot of smoking going on in here, you know. And I was like, and I'm allergic to cigarette smoke, so I was like, oh shit, I want every band to say that, because I kept getting bronchitis, and I was like, fuck, that's cool. And it wasn't like your tactics. I didn't, you know, I thought about it a lot on the way back, all these little things, like on our drive back to San Diego, 9 hours or whatever, 10 hours. And I was thinking, like, man, he told him not to, like, he like brought up the fact that everybody smoked, and you know, I thought about that stupid kid and walking around with a cigarette, and I was like, yeah, it's such a dumb thing, and I'm not a fan of smoking. It sucks. So there was that. But then when you guys played, I think you played like 2 songs, or 3 songs, and then you made a comment about not moshing, and I was like, that was the first time, because you guys, Downcast is kind of known for that sort of like sit down in the pit kind of thing, and I was like, holy shit, this is wild. Like, what is everybody gonna do if they can't mosh? Like, I just thought that's the only thing that we did, and so there was a little bit of backlash, and it was it was all these things that were like really coming into focus. Like, I was like, oh, the band's getting kind of frustrated, the audience is being fucking dicks, and then I don't know what, dude, it was so weird because Brent decided to hurl himself over his amp for some strange ass reason, and he broke his arm, and you guys only played 4 songs, or it was actually 3.5 songs, and that was it. And I thought, holy shit, man, this is like probably one of the best 3 shows I've seen in my life. And I was like, wow. I mean, at the time, maybe the best 2, like meeting the Cramps and then like going and seeing you guys were probably the two, like at that point I was like, holy fuck, here's everything. So I was like, wow, man, that's so weird. And you guys were just like, I remember you kind of just being like, oh, we think his arm's broken, and so we're going to stop. And I was like, holy shit, that is the craziest performance I've ever seen. And not even, most of it had nothing to do with the music, And so, I mean, I was already sold on the music. And then that was it. I was, then I think then like Struggle ended up playing the Red Barn, and maybe, I don't know if it was with you guys, but either way, we ended up playing together and becoming friends. And that was such an important thing to see all these little aspects, because at the time I was still into stupid punk rock, and I needed like a kind of kick in the ass to get my shit sorted out, and not to sort of be so accepting of that, not the nihilistic kind of I don't know what anyhow. So I would love to know where all these elements you think came from, because they had to have come from somewhere. You guys had this packaged thing. Like, I don't mean this in like a consumerist way, but you presented this thing that was so, at the time, seemed so well articulated and precise. And I watched myself and all my friends be like, that's the jam right there, So, I mean, I get it. A lot of it was happening like with Born Against and Rorschach and stuff at the time, but like somehow that was where it was all kind of happening,
Yeah. I have to preface everything with saying that I've probably had like 30 to 50 concussions in my life, and so I'm definitely going to be like working on some traumatic brain injury stuff. So my memory of a lot of things, there's weird things that pop up in my mind that I remember. There's a lot of stuff that's just gone. So forgive me if, I can't quite recall names or faces or places or events that seem like I should. I do remember that show, but those early days of Downcast, one of the things that I think that we had going for us is that we came from really similar and really dissimilar like social groups out of like high school in those formative ages, right? Like Dave, the bass player, oh, and also sometimes I get really emotional. So if I start crying or whatever, just give me a minute. I'll get my shit together. The weirdest little things, like just talking about Dave, I can already feel myself getting emotional because I love the guy so much. But, he and I were best friends in 2nd grade, like well before we even, I didn't even start really listening to music until around 2nd or 3rd grade, like Sabbath and KLOS and Breakfast with the Beatles on the weekends and whatever. But Dave was my conduit, to many things in my life, but possibly most importantly was punk rock. He had an older friend that got him into punk rock, and by in 1984, when I was 13, he was 14, we went and saw Black Flag, the Minutemen, and the Ramones at the Hollywood Stadium for our first show, and we just got dropped off by his dad, who recently passed away. And he picked us up in like 4 or 5 hours, and there was a little riot afterwards, and we were just like, holy fuck, like what is this? And I remember that show being so scared because we were so young, like up on the balcony and people jumping off of the balcony at the Palladium, and like, you know, fights and some of that quote unquote like kind of bad punk rock behavior that you're talking about, but also just the insane energy and violence and immediacy. And, you know, the Minutemen were intensely political. Black Flag was its own animal, especially at that time, kind of near the end. And the Ramones were, you know, kind of like a pop punk band that was more like a cult following, if anything. They hadn't become a clothing brand yet. But we were attracted to that energy. And then, you know, we fucked around with a couple. Is it okay if I cuss?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
We fucked around with a couple, like, you know, weird little garage bands before, you know, Downcast kind of came into being. But you know, we grew up together in Canyon Country, north of Los Angeles, in the suburbs, and being best friends and being exposed to a lot of the same stuff. You know, once we kind of met Brent and Kent and Sonia, the connections were really easy to make with the stuff that we were seeing in this, like the self-destructive behavior of our peers and ourselves, despite being like trying to be alternative and outside of the mainstream in this alternative, crazy, intense music. The similarities between what we were seeing and what we were doing. I had a ripping drinking problem. I used to fight all the time. It was terrible. And we started making the connections between what we were experiencing in our home lives and with the people that were like living a really like mainstream, I'll just use the word unhealthy, in my opinion, unhealthy, self-destructive lifestyle. And then we were doing the same shit and seeing the same shit going on at shows, even though we were supposed to be doing something different. And so we just thought, well, we're not going to just talk about straight edge like every other straight edge band, because we never really wanted to be a straight edge band. We didn't drink, and I stopped drinking at the age of 18 because I had a problem. Dave never really got into it. Brent, you know, we just all were kind of like straight edge, and being around Kent, there was like a really good support network for that. But we just, I think early on made the connection between just the hypocrisy of like, we're supposed to be doing something different and alternative from this mainstream culture. And we're walking around the pit, punching each other in the face and smoking cigarettes and drinking beer and getting in fights. Like what the fuck is different about that and going to a fucking Motley Crue show in 1988 or 1989, you know, other than the hair. And so we just thought, well, we have the stage. I'm a super shy person by nature. I get really nervous doing things like this. I get really nervous being in front of people. You know, I know it doesn't seem like it. Once the music starts, I'm fine because I just kind of lose myself in it. But we just thought, you know, we have the moment, we have the stage. We're going to talk about this shit. I mean, I grew up with two parents that, you know, smoked cigarettes incessantly. I hated it. I've never smoked a cigarette in my life. I hated being around cigarette smoke. And you know, just you'd get on stage. So that just specifically to the cigarette smoking question, that would always come up. But, you know, I've read things online, you know, over the years, especially since we've like reformed and put out a record, and, you know, you get these little blips on social media that are like, oh, you know, I saw them at this show, and, you know, how could they expect to play that style of music and not have people, you know, moshing? And it's a fair question, but, you know, we were never really about people not dancing or moshing or thrashing around and being violent. I mean, we played some shows at the Che where, you know, I mean, there's pictures of us like in the crowd and people falling all over us, and it was like amazing. You know, we just had a problem with, you know, like this 6'3" drunk skinhead guy walking around in a circle and punching men, women, kids, anybody in the back of the head in the name of like what they thought their version of punk rock was. And we didn't want to be a soundtrack for violence. We didn't mind being a soundtrack for upheaval and some sort of like, schism, personal or political, and having people, maybe be motivated to do something with their lives. But we were always hoping to affect some sort of positive change in it. And very early on, we just thought, if we're not going to address the shit that's happening right now in front of our eyes that we think is fucked up, like, what are we doing? And we never really got great at it. I'm terrible at that stuff. Like, I think Ian Mackay is really good at stuff like that, like the energy of the crowd and dealing with them. And I've been to a lot of shows where there's that conflict can work to your advantage. I would just internalize it and just get crazier and crazier and crazier. And sometimes we would just self-destruct on stage, and that happened a lot. And that's basically what happened with Brent. I remember when we were on tour in Europe, on the second Downcast tour, we had to stop a show in Poland because we had to ask someone to come out and translate and say specifically, there's an element happening here where people are literally just fighting every time or just attacking each other. It wasn't dancing. It wasn't even like New York style hardcore crazy where you're throwing fists. It was just people just running around punching each other in the head. And we were just like, we can't do this. We can't be a part of this. And so we were just always trying to address that stuff. And for us, the whole, I think it came from like the 60s or 70s feminist movement, the personal is the political, like that really resonated with us. I mean, I struggle with those things, right? Like I have my whole life. I've struggled with addiction. I've struggled with trying to be a good father. I've struggled with trying to be a good husband. I've struggled with, getting out of punk rock and being more in the mainstream and all that stuff. But living your life in integrity and taking your politics, you go to the ballot box and you can watch MSNBC and you can write books and you can make songs, but my wife, my partner, and I've been together for 32 years. We started dating in high school. We've had a lot of ups and downs. If I can't figure out how to be a good husband and a good partner for her, in our lives together, and a good father to my kids, like the politics and the bigger, grander things are not meaningless. They still have meaning, but they're like kind of hollow. And so we just always kind of focus on, well, what's happening right now? Who are we? What are we doing? What are we about? What are we seeing in our immediate lives? And it was challenging because all we really wanted to do was just, rock out. We liked our music. We liked our song. I mean, Dave never really liked the band, I don't think, I think or at least he always said, that he liked it, but he just never, I think he really liked different kinds of music than what we were doing. So he would always sort of like, tongue in cheek, I think most of the time, but say that we sucked or whatever. But I really liked our band. I liked what we were doing. I liked the music that we were making. And we just wanted to go and play our songs, talk about what we were singing about, and just, have a good time and have everybody else have a good time. But there were times and moments that would happen where I just felt obligated to address stuff, And I think that what you're referring to was very early on. And we sort of never lost that,
But maybe
what that experience is like going to be going forward if and when we get to finally play shows again. It's
a much different world though.
It's a different world and we're different people.
Yeah.
I think, I can only speak for myself, but, having been like immersed, like everything changed for me when we got pregnant, right? Like I have a 24-year-old daughter and a 21-year-old daughter, and definitely for the best. Like my life took an extremely drastic turn, without the kids being born, I'd probably still have hair down to my ass and piercings in my face and full sleeve tattoos. And I would be that old punker at the shows. Cause I loved it. That's what I was into. That's what we wanted to do. That's what I always wanted to do. When we got pregnant, both of my kids were happy accidents, we say. But I didn't have a backup plan. Like I thought I was going to be a hardcore kid forever. And so I sort of was like, how am I going to not do what my dad did and hate my life trying to support my family, have some sort of career or something that I can actually sink my teeth in and be in integrity about, raise a family, and still be like a punk rocker. And I just didn't know how to do it. And it was so sudden. Like I literally was in a band called Born and Raised, and we went on our last 2 month tour during my wife's, she was my girlfriend at the time, middle trimester. I came home and she had a belly like out to here, and I was like, holy fuck, we're really having a baby. Like, this is crazy, you know? And so I just had to make some decisions and stuff. And for me, there's not a lot of things I do in my life that I do less than like everything I have, you know? I just don't do a lot of stuff half-assed. I don't have time. I never have had time. So if I'm going to play hardcore, it was all about hardcore. If I'm going to be a dad, then I just thought, fuck, I just can't, I don't know how to do hardcore the way I wanted to do it and still be a father and eventually a husband that I could be proud of. And so I think now, I'm just speaking a little bit to your question about, you know, the show that you saw. Obviously, that's only our second show in like 25 or 30 years or something. So we're still working some things out, obviously. But for me now, personally, it's just more nuanced. Like, everything's more nuanced. Like, I feel like I could address a lot of the same things, but I just see a little bit more, like, I definitely feel a lot less judgmental. Maybe that's not the right word, but having chosen to sort of like really get into the mainstream world and being like, I'm a Los Angeles County firefighter paramedic, you know? And when I went to go pick up my application to apply for that job, I had hair down to my ass and piercings in my face. And the guy that gave me the application at the fire station, like, you know, did the elevator eyes and was just like, what the fuck? Like, you want to be a firefighter? Like, that makes no sense. But he doesn't know, you know, who I was before, what my integrity is, like what my, you know, any of that stuff. And I love my job and it's been great, but being, you know, more of a mainstream person and having to figure out how to support my family by working on construction sites with a bunch of dudes that, some of which I thought were cool, some of which were total dicks, working in very male dominated cultures, physical cultures, dangerous stuff in the fire department. You know, like, I developed these bonds with these guys that I love to death. I'd die for them tomorrow, you know, but we don't agree on a lot of stuff politically. And so just learning how to kind of navigate that stuff. I think my politics haven't got less extreme. In fact, I think they've gotten more extreme, especially having girls. Like, I thought I was a feminist before I had daughters. You know, I would commit felonies for my kids. My kids are everything to me. But trying to just those edges kind of soften, you know? So I would probably still talk about people smoking cigarettes at shows because I think it's fucking stupid and rude and whatever. But I don't really judge people for, you know, feeling like they need to use tobacco and smoke cigarettes. Like, if they're going to do it, I would appreciate it if they would maybe do it somewhere, you know what I mean? Like, it's gotten weirder and more complicated. So the hate comes easy part of that question too. Like, we've talked, like, whenever we play shows from now on, that song is being played. I mean, it's still appropriate song to play. We still feel those things, you know. At the time, it was a little bit more specific towards our scene because we would get, you know, my crew from high school, we would get in fights with skinheads at shows. Like, yeah. We had no problem fighting. And I don't consider myself a violent person, but I've just never been able to deal with bullies in any way, shape, or form. And so I've just always thought, you know, we've been at shows and I've jumped off the stage and jumped on people before and, you know, shut down fights and all that stuff. But I think we still have that crazy anger and whatever, but it's as 50-year-old men now with a little bit more nuance to it instead of kind of what we were feeling as 17, 18, 19-year-olds, you know?
I mean, it's different, obviously, back then when there was the neo-Nazi problem, you know, like it was like rampant. And now there's neo-Nazis in a different context, you know, but I don't know, I think maybe punk somewhat evolved, but from one thing I learned, I think through maybe ebullition, was that like, there is this, that like, sense that like, there's punk rock and then there's punk. And that's something that I thought really was defined when I discovered Ebullition and specifically, you know, um, Downcast. It was like, it wasn't like punk rock, but it was punk. And I think that like that kind of concept of what, because to me, I was looking at bands like, I don't know, like James Chance or something, you know, from the Contortions. Like that guy's totally punk, and he plays a saxophone and wears a suit, you know, like doesn't have a mohawk, it doesn't, you know, it doesn't have a jacket with the Exploited on it, but he's punk as fuck. And so that was the kind of thing that I would like focus on. And so I think when I would see a lot of the stuff that Ebullition was doing, it made that very clear to me. And then also, you know, it was like redefining something that was in need of some sort of redefine, like, so it needed to be fixed, I think, you know, because there was that nihilistic Sid Vicious kind of wear a swastika on your t-shirt kind of aspect that I think was like made sense at one point, and then it was like, okay, we got to move on from this. Like we got way bigger problems or different problems, and then I would watch like the people with that kind of mindset, or even you like being like an official punk rocker in a punk band that like leaves that community or whatever. You didn't leave the community. You went and you became a firefighter and you had a family, but you still had those ethics. Like if anything, someone would be like, oh yeah, Kevin, he's the punk fucking firefighter, you know, like opposed to like the regular firefighter. Like you still have that in you. And I think that's like an important part that maybe defines your humanity or your ability to how you navigate in the world, opposed to someone that doesn't have those set of morals. You know, I mean that is something I think that is really important, because now too, also like talking about the evolution of where we're at. Like I remember like when we first started playing, you know, shows together, I would always trip out when I would see like a band that had a dude with a mustache in it. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, how old is that guy? You know, a mustache. That's so weird. And now it's like even weirder, because now it's like, oh, so and so from that band is like a head of this corporation, or like they work in this, you know, they work for this like, you know, nonprofit, or they're this politician, or you know, like Jason Hammerker. I don't know if you know him, but he's like, he ran for office in DC last in 2020. I'm like, what? This is so weird to me, you know. But that's the kind of thing where even, you know, even like even seeing, I don't know. I mean, not steering too far away, but like, you know, hearing a Rorschach song on like a film, you know, like someone had to be hip to Rorschach to license that, you know, like those things are kind of weird. So I think it just took a minute for all of us to kind of get out everywhere into the world, and but it was already there, because even how you went and saw, you had, I mean, even that show you brought up with Black Flag, Minutemen, and Ramones, that's an interesting thing, because I would hear about I heard about a tour that, I don't know if Minor Threat did the tour with the Ramones, but they definitely played a show together, or played multiple shows. And at that time, and I never really cared. I never called myself straight edge. I never really identified with it. I never actually was straight. I never was straight edge, but I associated with it a lot, band members and stuff. But like, I remember hearing how Minor Threat just wanted to play, you know, they were like psyched to play with the Ramones, and they realized like, oh, they're all fucked up on heroin. And then there's Minor Threat, who's sober and badass at that time, just like ripping super hard. And I remember like kind of tripping out on that, thinking out, wow, Minor Threat had this huge advantage over the Ramones. But the fans of the Ramones just wanted the Ramones. They didn't want something that was new. They didn't want something that was badass or like tough or crazy. I don't know what you want to call it, you know? So, I mean, I even saw that when Retox did a tour with our first U.S. tour with that band Off, and I fucking love Off. I love Keith. I love Mario. I think that band is awesome. I think that band is probably Keith's best band, mainly because of Mario Rubalcaba playing drums. But every night when we would play, I would see this thing. First of all, every night when we would play, people hated Retox because we were brutal. Like, it was like brutal music compared to like, you know, Off is fun and punky and punk. I mean, I think Keith and the band share the same sort of morals that we all do, but it was anyhow, they hated us, and then Off would play, and they just wanted Black Flag, you know, they wanted Keith from Black Flag. Yeah. And I remember thinking like, fuck this band, and then I would see Off play, and I'd be like, fuck or not fuck this band, fuck these people. And then I would see off play, and then I'd really say fuck these people, because then it's like these guys, they're not learning. They just want that crap, you know? And it was such a bummer to see that. But then at the same time, I thought, well, we're dealing with the wrong audience. Like, not everybody is able to be progressive, unfortunately. And some people are stuck in I don't know what year you want to call that, 80s or 90s, you know, they don't want to move on. So I don't know, even going back to seeing like Downcast play recently, it's like, yeah, we're lucky that we can play shows, or I can see you play and there not be 10 neo-Nazi skinheads fucking up everybody in the crowd. That's a really important thing. And so then maybe it's a whole bunch of things, like, oh, we can focus on more important things, like, you know, actual humanity, or connecting to a community or people, or hang out with a bunch of, like, you know, older people, I guess. Because at the time, like when Downcast was playing in the beginning, it was rare to see someone in their 40s or 50s at your show. And if you did, you were like, what the fuck is that old? That person's probably an undercover cop, you know. But now it's like most of the people are that are young.
Yeah, it's a trippy evolution that you know, when you're in it in that moment and you can't see into the future, you just don't know what it's going to look like. You just think it's going to be the same forever. And I think it's one of the beautiful things about the hardcore scene and hardcore in general, and punk, and, you know, whatever little microcosm of world that people are lucky enough to experience in their lives at any point in time. But like, it's insular in so many ways. And so there's a beauty to that, where you could just go play these free shows at the Red Barn, or go down to the Che, or go play, you know, you go on tour and the club gets burned down the week before you get there. And some kid who was just going to go to the show is like, hey, I just thought you guys might want to come over to my mom's house, get a big like pot of vegan chili. We're going to move all the furniture out of the living room and you guys can play there. And I'll call all my friends and we'll pass the hat. And you guys can get from, like, you know, Phoenix to Tucson or wherever.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. And then at the same time, you have these ideas and these thoughts and these really passionate things, and there's these fanzines going on, and you're sharing all these ideas, and it's like, you know, my mom's going, well, why the fuck are you doing this? You know, like, well, I like connecting with people. She's like, what are you talking about? You're connecting with like 20 people. If you wanted to connect, you'd play music that was like more accessible. It's like, well, yeah, but I don't like that world. I don't want to be part of that world. I want to connect with the people that are wanting to get out of that world and maybe make some change or inspire them to do whatever it is that they're going to do in their lives. And I think subconsciously maybe, or definitely wasn't conscious, but what I realized much later, like after the band was done, like, you know, the kids were born and we would get like onesies sent to us from like Switzerland from people that just came to the show, you know, hey, congratulations. Hope you know, are living your best life and maybe you'll play music again or something, you know? And what happens organically is that not everybody can be Kent McClard. He dictates the terms of his life, and there's something incredibly special and beautiful and unique and inspiring about that. Like, I've been a vegan for this long, I've been straight edge for this long, I've ran this record label, I've done it all myself. I mean, he started that label with the Downcast record because Inside Out didn't want to be on the label, you know, they wanted to be on Revelation. He started like in a closet in our apartment that we all lived in together. And, you know, he was a janitor at the time. He was a janitor working at UC Santa Barbara, like scrubbing toilets. I mean, I remember talking about him having to put gloves on and scrape human feces out of a fucking toilet to clean it. Like, that was his job. And then he was trying to run this record label for almost no profit. And people like you, similar but different, like there's this whole spectrum, right? Of like Charles Maggio, like Sam McPheeters comes to mind, like people that have just really, I think Kent's in a very extreme version of like, these are my rules that I live by and I will never not live by them. And then people like me who, you know, I didn't want to sell out musically, and I don't think I'm even capable of it because I'm not a talented enough musician. But there's an element of guilt, a little bit of element of guilt, at least at the beginning, of like stepping out of the crazy alternative world that we were living and putting a foot or sometimes 2 feet, sometimes the whole thing into the mainstream while trying to still be yourself. But like, we go out and affect the world. We go out and infect and affect whatever it is that we do with our lives. And so I think there's also something really special, like, you know, Adam Nathanson from Born Against is doing incredible work on the East Coast. Dave McClure, you know, the bass player for Downcast, like, he has 2 kids. He's doing an incredible job as a father. He works for the city of Los Angeles, getting people off the streets, into public housing, into work, right? Like, incredible work. And that punk rock ethic and ethos will always be with him and will affect him for the rest of his life and everything that he does, as well as everybody that he comes into contact in the mainstream world, right? So, and Brent Stevens is the superintendent for the public school district in Oakland, California, you know, up in north. Like, he has a lot of power over the education of all these kids in Oakland, and he's just an old punk rocker.
Yeah.
Like a hardcore kid from Southern California who's now doing these really amazing things. Like, my world isn't that big, but, you know, I write for like a magazine for the fire department. I'm a senior guy at my firehouse where there's, you know, 17 other dudes that look up to me and look to me for, you know, yeah, I'm the vegan in the firehouse that they think if they make cheese enchiladas, they're hooking me up. And they know that I'm kind of a weirdo, but they also know that I've been on more fires than they're ever going to go on. I've stayed up more days than they're ever going to go on. They see all these other things that I do that they admire, and then they get exposed to this like punk rock shit, and it makes connections for them, and then it affects them in a positive way, and it kind of turns them not into punk rockers, but it turns them into like something that's like a little bit more conscious, a little bit more connected, a little bit more, you know, turning off Fox News and turning on something else and getting different kinds of information. Like, I think there's a lot of beauty in the insular thing that we did and we do. And there's also something, it's difficult because it's really hard to navigate sometimes. It's complicated, and for me, it's really hard because I'm really shy and I don't like conflict. You know, it's like one of those abused kid syndrome things. Like, I just would rather not talk about shit, but when something's important to me, it has to come up and it has to happen. But taking the stuff that we learned and developed and grew into as young people in like a crazy, super conscious, like, if you wore leather boots back then, like, it was kind of a big fucking deal, you know? And then to be 30 or 40 or 50 and navigating, you know, weird adult mainstream life, but with these same ideals, is like challenging, and also just such a great opportunity to affect change on a really personal and meaningful level, you know? And that's how I was thinking about it. My wife, Jody, has never been in a hardcore, but has always supported what I've done without ever really digging the music. And so she's always been a huge vehicle for social change. She's always been a social worker. She now runs a private school up here in Ojai. You know, I always look to her as this person who's doing these incredible things and has this deep-seated, what I call like a hardcore punk rock ethos, even though she was never even really a punk rocker, you know? And I think that we cut our teeth on all these ideals and stuff, and then to take that into the real world or the regular world or the less insular world or whatever, I think can be a really positive thing.
So, I mean, what about like, because you brought up Kent, and I think that's an interesting, he's an interesting character to point out, because for whatever reason it was, I mean, it seemed, it was so easy for me as a 15-year-old just to play a show and to put out a record, and to put out a record that was with really high standards, you know? I mean, the vibe and the community and the look and everything, that like the design that went into everything that happened with Ebullition, even like how he put his own insert in every record, you know, like that was really an interesting thing. And I think he had a lot of control, not like that he demanded control, but he gained a lot of control. And then I remember like sort of feeling this weird backlash, because I remember tripping out on how awesome Antioch Arrow was and how he just hated them. And I didn't really understand, because he said they didn't have real lyrics, or they were like they're whatever his gripe was. It just, there was like these, like you said, like he has all these like goal or rules, and that's what you have to live by. And I never really understood this like the negative aspect, because then I remember when Swing Kids started, we played with what band did we play? Our first show we played with Hara, I think, in Santa Barbara. And he just made fun of us to our faces, and we're just like, this sucks, man. Like, I don't understand why. And it was because we weren't talking about how we hated all cops, and we weren't burning the flag, and we had, all of a sudden, we had got rid of our shitty mohawks and dreadlocks, and we had mod haircuts. But regardless, we were still, as far as we were concerned, we were still punk as fuck. We were even more punk because we had like someone that we looked up to being critical towards us. So then it was just like, it was a bummer, but I think it was really important, and I think it was good in retrospect, because that shit that he was pushing later on, I don't know, I mean, because Abolition still exists, but like, later on, like, I don't know if that's the right word. That shit he was pushing at that time definitely was like the roots of even me and my friends starting the Locust. Like, we were like, okay, you think Antioch Arrow is fucking weird, like, we're gonna do this other shit, and that was the point, and I'm glad that happened, because I think if Kent never did that, we might have just kind of kept cruising in like regular hardcore mode,
Yeah. And that's a testament to you and your upbringing, and I think it's healthy to have a big fuck you attitude. At some point, you just, like I said, I'm really shy, but when that line gets crossed, it's like, fuck you, this is what I'm doing. Fuck you, who the fuck are you to criticize me?
Sure.
Who the fuck do you think you are, whether it's Kent or, my kids or my wife, my mom, my boss, right? Like, I would never talk to my wife that way, because she's amazing. And she would never even treat me like that. But like, I think I can't speak from Kent's perspective, obviously, but I know that there's an element of Kent that's like, hey, I'm just a regular person. Not everyone sees themselves as the icon that they become. And if I don't like your band, I don't like your band. What's the big fucking deal? Well, it was a big deal back then, But your reaction to that, to go even more extreme, I mean, the stuff. When I finally listened to, like, well, we'll just say the Locust, because that's what we're talking about. When I finally listened to the Locust, I was like, oh my God, I have never fucking heard anything like this. I can't stop listening to it. This is insane. It was like the closest thing I could even think in my, because once we had kids, like I really dropped out. I mean, I was like, I wasn't buying records, I wasn't listening to a lot of stuff. And so there's a huge gap for me. Like, I'm still listening to Swizz and Verbal Assault. Like, those are my jams. I'm like cooking vegan meals and having like a dry martini and listening to like Verbal Assault, on my Sonos speakers in my kitchen. My kids are just like, what the fuck, Dad? Like, anyway, but like a tiny bit of element of like Drive Like Jehu or something in there, and then just taking to this extreme. And then I just saw you guys like last year in LA, or a year and a half ago, pre-COVID or whatever. And it was phenomenal. It was crazy. And it was nothing like anything that's, well, number one, that I've ever seen, but nothing like anything that was ever happening back then. And so I think Kent's thing always was, he just always thought of himself as just another regular dude. And if you don't like what I like or what I do, go start your own label. That's what I did. You don't like the music that I like, go fucking listen to something else. He just never, I don't think he ever really, maybe he has now, but I think that back then, I just don't think he ever thought of himself as someone that their opinion mattered a lot like that. And then when you don't have that consciousness, it's pretty easy to be like almost not offensive, but just to be a jerk, you know. And there's a lot of people that don't like Kent or think of Kent as a jerk because of some interaction that they have. Like I think there's people in Spitboy that are like that because Kent went on tour with them. I mean, I've heard stuff about that. I don't know firsthand, but like Kent is literally one of the most extreme people I've ever known. He's just who he is all the time, no matter what, and he doesn't really give too much of a shit what anybody thinks. And if he hurts my feelings or your feelings or somebody else's feelings, especially back then, he just was such an extreme personality, you know.
Well, I don't think he was like, I didn't mean like he hurt my feelings. I just was kind of like, what the fuck? This is our friend. Why is he talking shit? It wasn't like, oh my God, I'm sad. I was just like, oh, fuck him. We're going to do something cooler. And
I'm sure I didn't phrase it properly.
But that's what we needed. We needed that, like, because it's almost like Kent became the sort of the like concept that you had of that Ramones Black Flag Minutemen show, like where you're just like, Kent became that for me, not for me, but like, because it wasn't that extreme, but I was kind of like, all right, well, if you're gonna make fun of us, well, fuck you. I'm gonna start my own label and we're gonna do shit that we want to do. That maybe, I mean, I don't expect him to like it, but like if he never sort of like, you know, made fun of us or whatever, like I probably would have been, hey, will you put out the Swing Kids record? And then I never would have started 31G, you know. It would have that was the point, like him making fun of me, the guy that I thought like, this is the fucking raddest record label next to like, you know, Vermiform or whatever, you know. And that maybe that's a good example too, because at the time I was like seeing all these other labels that were a little bit older than me and a little bit more, had a couple of years on me that were like advanced as far as like doing things. There was Discord, and then there was right behind Discord was stuff like Ebullition and Vermiform. And so I remember thinking, well, I love all this shit, but like when I looked at Vermiform and Salmon Feeders, I'm like, well, that guy's doing Men's Recovery Project. I mean, that seemed like, to me, where you're saying like the Locust was crazy, I was like, I don't know, the Locust just seemed like another kind of, you know, mutation of the Men's Recovery Project stuff, you know.
Yeah.
So I guess it's all perspective in that context.
I just think it's a testament to like a personality type. I guess in a roundabout way, I know you don't take it very well, but I'm trying to give you a compliment. I think that there's people out there that, you know, they get inspired by something, like a guy jumping over an amp and breaking his arm, and fuck, that's amazing. That's the kind of shit I want to do. And then they also get inspired by the negative, and then someone, let's leave Kent out of it, but just a negative experience and going, you know what, fuck that, I'm going to go do this then. And now I'm really going to do this. Like, I think that's a kind of a personality type. And I think you have that. And I think that that's really great, which is why you have been able to persevere and do such amazing things all these years, because no matter what comes your way, you're just like, yep, okay, fuck it, let's go do this thing. I'm going to try this. You know what? I'm going to do like a band that's got like some hip hop shit in it. And we're going to have rapping, and I'm going to, you know, cover new wave bands from the 80s because I like that shit, and I'm going to put my own spin on it. And, you know, like, I just think that's like a real artist.
But don't you think you did that though? I mean, artist is like, you could be any, like, okay, musician, okay, because I don't call myself a musician. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I can't read music. I call myself an artist, but don't you think you did that? I mean, shit, you came back and you're like, oh shit, now I'm gonna be a father, and you're like, oh shit, now I'm gonna be a firefighter. It's like, it's kind of the same thing, you know. You're just like, I'm gonna do these things now. Like, I feel like it's the same thing. I mean, you raise your kids as a punk, you know, like, you're not your parents, you're not, you know, you're not the adult, you know, parent, like, persona that we grew up looking at, you know, like you were like the new thing. So give yourself some credit.
See, I told you weren't very good at taking a compliment. I tried to compliment you, and you turned around and try to compliment me.
Yeah. Well, okay. So can we talk about, you know, the spin on Downcast now? Because, man, I don't know. Like, you. It's a weird thing because you were like, let's do this. You know, you played a handful of shows, put out a record, and then the world took a shit on everybody, you know? Yeah.
So we're lucky in that aspect. I mean, there's an element of like poor us, you know, poor me. in the sense that, wow, we were really getting excited. There was talks of like a week or week and a half in Japan, and then maybe like a little California tour. And my life is very full, but like, this is not our gig. This is something that we decided to come back to try and do, and everybody in the world got shit on in a really profound way. My wife's dad passed away from COVID. I mean, there's some really big deal things that are happening out there because of this.
Yeah.
And if Downcast has to wait a little bit, we're okay. Brett and I are talking about getting together and doing like a little 2 or 3 song, demo for free online, just to, because we, I don't know if we have the time, but I gotta say, like, this is really like never would have happened without Brent. Like he was the engine, he was the vehicle. I got a call from him. We imploded on our European tour where we stopped talking to each other completely and never reconciled. We were young, we were angry, we were terrible communicators. He was probably like clinically depressed, and he didn't know how to express himself about it. We didn't know how to deal with it, and it was terrible. And I've always felt bad about that, but we just never really had the tools to figure out how to do that differently. And then when he called a few years ago, he was like, "You have dog issues too." My dog's sitting over there whining like she's never been outside ever.
Well, I have these. Come on in. I have these skateboarders next door that he's pissed at.
Okay, well, now I'm going to do the same thing. This is going to be like interactive. I'm going to walk over and let my dog out because she's just like, I know there's a skunk out there I want to chase and go get skunked. Well, my dogs will. Hey, look, there they are. Hank and Lucy. All right, go. Have fun. Thank you.
I hope they don't get sprayed.
Back to business.
Okay.
It's a monthly occurrence. But yeah, like, Brent called and he's like, "Hey, how's everything going?" We caught up and he's like, "Oh, this is really nice." And then he's like, "Have you ever thought about just recording those last, 3-4 songs that we never recorded?" And I was like, "No, absolutely not. Like, I do not have the time. My life is full. I've got a kid in high school. I've got a kid in college. Like, I teach for the fire department. I work at the second busiest firehouse in all of Los Angeles County. I never get any sleep. I've been remodeling my house single-handedly by myself because I'm a fucking DIY punk rocker and I have to do everything myself. Like, and that's just happening. Like, there's no way. It's impossible." And he's like, "Okay, I just thought I'd ask." And I go home and I talk to Jody and I'm like, "You're never going to believe what happened." And I tell her and she's like, "Are you fucking crazy? There's no way. Like, you don't have any time. What are you going to do? Quit your job and go on tour for 3 months again?" And I'm like, no. I told him no, like, there's no way. She's like, "Okay, cool." And then 2 weeks go by and she's like, "If you cleaned up the garage a little bit, you guys could probably jam in there." And I'm like, "What the fuck? Like, you really, like, seriously?" She's like, "Well, I don't know. I mean, I know you really love it and I think it would be fun and you guys should, just explore it. It's just like 3 or 4 songs, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I guess so." And then, Brent's like, "Hey, I've got other material. Do you want to, like, we'll call Sean," and we called Dave, and everyone was like really into it. In a limited capacity, they were really into it, and we just, thought we'd give it a shot. Dave couldn't pull it off with everything that he's got going on, and we had a nice, long, cathartic talk about it, and he was just like, "Yeah, I'd feel bad, but I don't know who you would consider for another bass player." And I was like, "Well, my brother. I've been in a band with my brother, and he lives in Ohio with me, and we're still really close, and he's a ripping bass player, whatever." And Dave's like, "Oh, fuck, that'd be great. It's still in the family." And Dave and my brother have been friends since as long as Dave and I have been friends because we all grew up together. But like it was really organic. Like, we were just going to try to record these songs, and then we started writing new stuff, and then we started goofing around, and then I don't remember exactly what happened, but I remember calling Kent. I remember calling you. I remember having this idea, or you had this idea, or Brent had this idea. I don't remember who, but maybe we do a split thing because Kent was adamant about not wanting to do, anything that wasn't just like vinyl,
Yeah.
And we didn't know how to do the other stuff. And so just by the grace of both you guys, like, this thing actually happened. And then COVID hit, and we were just like, fuck, you know? So I my guitar sits right by my chair. I play it almost every night that I'm home, you know? I'm always noodling around. At the very least, like, we're back in like creative mode. I feel now that it's a little bit of time has gone by, I feel like Brent has a daughter, a young teenage daughter. My brother does not have kids. Sean has a teenage son who just went through some cancer and chemo, and that got through all that stuff really great, you know. And Sean's really busy with Good Riddance and other bands that he's in and stuff. I'm really busy with my work. Brent's really busy with his work, and my brother is, you know, as busy as he wants to be, so he's available whenever we're ready. We just feel like we're gonna keep trying to keep a little momentum, keep writing, you know, try to get together, have Brent and I try to get together and try to, you know, hash some things out. Technology is our friend. I mean, I remember we used to have to drive when Chris Hervey was alive. We would drive to Chris's house all the way out in you know, Covina from Santa Barbara and practice for like 12 hours to just try and learn 2 songs.
Yeah.
Like I'd be coughing up blood and I'd have a headache for 3 days. And now we, you know, Brent writes a track on GarageBand or whatever and sends it, and then I can put lyrics to it, and then we put like a computerized drum track to it, and then Greg writes some bass, and then we send it to Sean, and he changes things up. And now when we get together, we have, you know, at least a template of stuff to start with. It's changed everything, so it's made it a little bit easier. I kind of feel like we just kind of took like a really big break, and we're just kind of putting our toes back in the water of kind of what we might be able to do. But I think that all of us are like-minded enough that it felt really weird at first when people would ask me, you know, didn't you used to be in a hardcore band or whatever? I said, yeah. And then I had to start saying, well, I kind of am in a hardcore band. And then I kind of own it. I am in a hardcore band. And then I had to get over feeling weird about it, you know? Like, it's weird. Like, I have friends. My wife has friends. They come to the house. I cook them dinner. They have a glass of wine, and they're like, "So what'd you do this weekend?" And I'm like, "Practice with my band." Like, what?
Yeah.
What? And I'm like, "Yeah, you know what? I practiced with my fucking band. That's what I did. It was fucking great. That's why my voice sounds like this, and why I keep coughing up blood in the sink. I love it. Like, that's what I'm a fucking onion. Like, you don't know me. Like, just like that fucking guy at the fire station who gave me the fucking application and thought I was a fucking scumbag, which I was, you know, visually, but I was a really good person. You know, I was doing social work. I was feeding homeless people. You know, he didn't know any of that shit about me or, you know, punk rock culture or whatever. And I think it's really interesting, you know, like the themes of the music are a little bit different. The themes of the lyrics, there's a lot of stuff that, you know, as a 50-year-old father, you just see the world differently than you did as a 20-year-old person who never thought they were going to live to the age of 30. You know, I never thought I would make it to 30. And now that I have adult children, like, I never want to die. I don't know. I'm kind of a pessimistic agnostic. I don't know what's going to happen after this. I'm pretty sure that it's nothing. I'm pretty sure we just go into the ground and become worm food. But if that's the case, I love me and my kid. I'm like best friends with my kids, like, and my wife. Like, we get along great. And so I want to see what they do. I want to see what they become. I want to know, you know, I want to know what they're doing when they're 50. You know, my dad's dead. I know your dad passed when you were young. You know, I think he would, you know, I think my dad would want to know what my kids are doing, would want to know what I was doing. And so I'm just like, well, I'm just going to keep pushing and see. And if we can keep putting out records and playing shows, it doesn't have to look like it did when we, you know, got in a van with like 1 pair of shorts, no underwear, and 3 t-shirts and a pair of Vans and came back in 2 months. Like, we can do like 3 or 4 shows in California. We could fly to the East Coast and play 3 or 4 shows on the East Coast. I don't know what it looks like, but I don't see why we can't keep going. I mean, we definitely want to play something a little. The next recording that we do is going to be a little bit more aggressive. I think that we were a little naive going into the studio this time, working with the person that we worked with. We really had to kind of stand our ground on a couple of things and make things be a little bit actually harder than what they ended up being. Like, I'm a terrible singer, and he was trying to get me to sing, and it was really challenging. It ended up being really fun. I really liked the record that we made. I really like the music that we're doing. I think it's better live than it is on the record. But you know, I listened to other stuff by, like, I don't know, like Dan O'Mahony's band that he was doing before COVID, and it's you know, it's got some Black Flag elements to it. They're obviously big Black Flag fans, but like, I really dig it, and it's really hard, and we still really like really hard music. And I think the new stuff that we end up putting together is going to be a little bit more like the earlier, like early Downcast stuff. So we'll see what happens.
But it still has to be a constant evolution. I mean, there are some bands that want to just hear the same shit over and over, or some fans that want to hear the same shit over and over. But I think evolution with perspective, maybe, or something. But
yeah, I just think it was a little bit more complicated. I mean, there's songs on there that if you play them live, they're pretty brutal because we speed them up a little bit. But I mean, what's brutal, you know, like in this versus, you know, like Downcast versus Retox, obviously we lose the brutality challenge every single time, or Anna's the back or something. But you know what I mean? Like, there's all kinds of variations of that, and it's all nuanced. But like, what we absolutely did not want to do was be a reunion band that got together and played our 7-inch songs, and it's one of the reasons why the first 2 shows we did not want to play Hate Comes Easy.
Yeah,
I think it's probably a mistake in retrospect, but who cares, because we're fucking punk rockers and we're going to fucking play what we want to play and not what anybody else wants us to play.
I'll admit I was like a little disappointed that there was no Hate Comes Easy, but I was appreciative of what I did get, and I was appreciative of the fact that in my mind I was figuring out why you didn't want to do it, and it might have been wrong, it might have been right, but either way I was like, that was fucking rad, man. Like, I 100% like A+, whatever, you know, like, it's your thing.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, I hate when people are like, why don't you do this shit from this record? I'm like, I don't want to do that ever again, you know. But with that being said, like, it's weird your perspective on things, because, you know, even when you compared it to Retox, I mean, maybe there's elements that are brutal, but man, I don't know. When I would, after the first Retox LP, like when we got like going or whatever, like when we did Beneath California and YPLL, I mean, I would go into those studios and talk to the producers we were working with and be like, I want to fucking sound like Britney Spears, man. I want to sound good. Like, I don't want to sound nasty and distorted, you know, and you were probably having the guy telling you, sing like Britney, and you're like, no, you know. I don't know.
It was I'm glad no one was filming it, let's put it that way. He'd be like, no, it's oh,
yeah,
and I'd go, oh, and he'd go, no, it's way higher than that, and I'd be like, oh, and he's just like, fuck, are you fucking tone deaf? And I was like, yes, I'm tone deaf. That's what I've been telling you this whole fucking time. I don't know how to do this. Like, my range is like this. My daughter, who is a really excellent musician, she plays jazz and sings jazz and plays in orchestras and shit, and plays in like a bunch of folk bands and jazz bands and shit. She calls it pitched speech. She said, yeah, Dad, you do pitched speech.
Huh.
I was like, whatever. Fuck you. I've been fucking singing in bands since you were even a glint in my eye, so don't worry about it. I don't need your criticism or your critiques or any lessons from you on how to sing. This is my thing. I'm going to do it my way, you know. But anyway, it was a really fun and super like engaging, fulfilling experience making another record like in my late 40s that I never thought I would want to do again. I never thought that would ever happen again. And so when we did it, once it came out, I was just so glad that we didn't, whether people loved it or hated it or whatever, it's irrelevant in some capacity. Like, obviously you want to be able to go to shows and have people get something out of it, even if it's like something negative or something. Like, it's nice to, something fulfilling about playing a show to, 20 to 50 or 200 people or something and have them be into it. Like, I remember being in Prague and just throwing the microphone into the crowd because they knew every lyric to every song and I could just dance and let them pass the mic around and sing the songs. It was just like, fuck, we wrote this song in my parents' garage in Canyon Country in the suburbs of, Southern California, north of Los Angeles, like 2 years ago when I was like 19 years old. Like, this is fucking ridiculous. It was a trippy thing. But at the same time, like, I never thought, we just are never going to do music because of who we are as hardcore kids at our core. No pun intended, but we're just never going to do shit that, whether Kent likes it or not, is irrelevant, or, no offense, but I think that you probably would put that record out because of our relationship and your relationship to Downcast or whatever. But like, we want people to dig it if they dig it, but if they don't dig it, as long as we like what we're doing, I think that's still by far the most important thing.
I mean, that's the whole.
Likes it. I don't care if my daughter. I just don't care. She's too advanced. She, whatever. It is what it is. Like, I don't care, because we're not doing it for that reason. We're doing it for our own shit, and there's no time. There's no time frame on that.
Well, I don't want to. I'm not criticizing your daughter at all, but like, I don't know if she's going to ever fully understand what it was like to see Downcast at the Che Cafe. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's something that you can't learn, or you just, that's just something. It's like, it's special shit. Only, I don't know, whatever. But so there's that. As much as you can credit your daughter as being talented in a musical perspective, she obviously, well, it's debatable if that stuff that we all did or still do is musical. But regardless, someone can't learn that or understand it fully without it being, in your heart or whatever you want to call it. Yeah. But even with the thing you said about releasing it, it's like, I'll be honest. Like, I was like, okay, I'm going to release this because I love this band and these people. And I think you only played a handful of shows or whatever. And I just thought, I don't know what's going to happen. And I remember, like, immediately, because it doesn't matter. I didn't care. And that's why 31G is 31G. But when it came out, I just remember the insane amount of people that were just like, holy shit, like, this is out, or this happened, or whatever, like the positive reaction to that, which, not that I don't think it should have happened, but I just think, like, they've been gone for so long. Where did all those, all those people that were seeing that go? I don't know. And apparently they all came back and were like, oh, fuck yeah, this is rad.
Well, the video helped, I'll tell you that much. Thanks, Andy.
Oh, no problem. Thank you.
It's nice to actually see you and talk to you in person, or sort of in person.
Yeah. No,
I don't know what time it is there. I'm terrible with numbers, but it can't even be close to probably a good time of day or night to be talking on the.
It's 10:10, so yeah, it's still okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice.
It's not too bad, but no, it's good to meet you. It really is.
You too. I mean, I like the song that we made. It is a little like one of the popular songs on our record that we made, but when you put the images that you put to it, it gave it like just another level of gravity. Like, I think the lyrics are pretty transparent, but what you put, like, I watched it this morning because I haven't seen it in, I don't know, 6 or 8 months or however long it's been.
It feels like ages ago now.
Yeah, I watched it a bunch of times when we first got it because I was just so blown away. And before I left, I get off work at like 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning. I work 48 hours straight, and then I come home. And before I left work, I thought, oh, Andy might be on this thing today. I should watch the video again because I hadn't seen it. And like, I looked on the Downcast like Instagram feed and it wasn't there. And I was like, I thought it was there, but I'm terrible at Instagram, so maybe it wasn't. And then I was trying to find it, and I finally found it on my phone. And I'm literally sitting in front of the fire station in my car, watching it on my phone, listening to it in my car, and like crying. Like, I was like so moved by the video. It was amazing. So once again, thank you. It was such a, it just was so poignant. And I know this is what you do, and you're just, probably wasn't, earth shattering or whatever, but for someone to take the time for our little hardcore band from 25, 30 years ago to do what you did with that song was really special to us. So thank you.
Thank you. I don't know how to respond to
that. Sorry, I told you I get a little. I get a little.
But I get it that you say it's our little hardcore band, but man, like maybe it was our little hardcore, your little hardcore band at that time, but it grew and it became something, because I remember like hitting publications and see if they want to cover it, like do like a premiere or something, and people are like, holy shit, like just the reaction, because I think, yeah, it's a little hardcore band to you, but it grew into something around the world, and that's cool, I mean, even like the glimpse that you had when you were talking about the Prague show, like, I mean, that's only one city and on the whole planet that had to have happened in other cities all over the place. So
it's
I don't know.
I would love to do if we were going to do, if I could do a dream something, it would to do like, I would love to do like a redo of the Born Against Rorschach Downcast tour that we crashed. Like, we weren't even supposed to be on that tour. We basically asked the guys if we could come with them, because we couldn't figure out how to book our own shows on the first US tour, because those guys are amazing. They're so talented. They're so good. Like, I think that we would still be the bottom of the barrel on that list.
Yeah.
By a lot, but I think that it would be pretty crazy,
But that tour also had Heroin and Crossed Out and Infest, I think. Like, that was like unbelievable shit.
Yeah. Yeah, it was amazing. To play with Born Against and Rorschach, like 20 nights in a row or something, from the West Coast to the East Coast, was pretty ridiculous. But like, yeah, I mean, I remember playing a show with Heroin one time, and for all my talk of not wanting to dance crazy, like, we were dancing, like, clothes came off, like, just went, like, I was smashed into the because we used to play in that dressing room above that club in Santa Barbara occasionally. Smashed into the glass of the dressing room and broke it. Cut my hand, big old scar on my hand. I still have the scar on my hand. Like, had to go to the hospital, get stitches. Like, there was just some crazy. I mean, I know we all have our war stories, but I wish I could remember more of them, because there was some moments where they were so special, and you just lost yourself so completely in the moment. It was like timeless,
Yeah.
It was you could do anything, you could conquer anything, you could become anything. It was like such a special time,
Dude, I remember going to that show with Rorschach, Born Against, and I had fucking chicken pox, and I still went because I had to go, man. And I gave out all my friends that didn't have them yet fucking got chicken pox, but I was like, dude, there's no way I'm gonna miss that. Like, like, fuck you to the maker or whoever, like, yeah, give me chicken pox. I'm still going to the Che, and I'm going to sweat and get gross shit all over these people. And luckily I was like, 16, everyone thought I just had bad acne. And I was like, no, I'm fucking totally covered. So there was that, man. There was no stopping me, So
That's
thanks.
nice. Thank you. I'm glad I had them already. So,
all right. Well, I think we've gone pretty far down this, rabbit hole. I can let you go, and you can get back to your
yeah, thank you, because I don't want to cry anymore on camera.
But so there will be more Downcast then. That's good to hear. I'm really glad to hear that.
Yeah, I can't rule it in or out, but we, Brent's a machine. That guy's, it might be worth you actually talking to him at some point. He is. I mean, I'm just kind of like the mouthpiece, but he is really the heart and the soul, lyrically, musically. We've shared the lyric writing duties for a long time, but this new record, there's some collaboration on there for sure, but he's the evil genius behind the whole thing. And I still love his music so much. The way he writes and just his persona and his character, the way he can put stuff together. And luckily, drums were my first instrument, so I still speak drum. That's how I like translate guitar speak into drummer speak and drummer speak into guitar speak, so we can actually put things together a little bit. Like Sean is obviously an amazing drummer, and Brent is an amazing guitarist, but sometimes drummers and guitarists have a really hard time. And luckily, I play both instruments not very well, but I can help them kind of come together with stuff. But Brent's, I still consider him to be, up there in like my top 3 all-time favorite guitarists. So it's really nice for me to be in a band with somebody that you really, really love their music and their musical style, And I just love him as a person. I'm so glad. I think that's what I'm most thankful about, is that we have reconnected. It's helped me reconnect with Dave. It's helped me reconnect with Sean. It's helped me reconnect with Brent. Like, for us to reconnect as like a core group of people and friends, as amazing as all this other stuff is and how cool it is, and the ego boost and being able to show my kids, some shit that I can still do and things like that. By far and away, the fact that we were able to connect as friends again on this really kind of deep, cool, creative path it's priceless. It's amazing. So I'm mostly thankful for that. So thank you for assisting in that process by helping us put out the record.
I mean, I think the world thanks you though, because I watched, the sales of the record and the like, just the people online, like the people streaming it and like commenting and stuff, like that's a big deal. People are really, really psyched. So.
Well, good. I'm glad.
Yeah. Thanks.